Y'all ready? Ready? Okay. The purpose of this press conference, and when did y'all's votes out? Let me start with that. How quickly? Is it up now?
Could be quick.
Could, okay. Yeah. We may make this a truncated press conference, or we may let senators come and go based on a vote that's up upstairs. But the purpose of the press conference prior to their departure is, I guess, twofold. One, to say that we can build a responsible budget, taking a portion of, or taking none of, in this case, taking a very large portion of the stimulus money, period. And it's the administration's intent to work with leaders on both my left and right, they're there in the Senate, that are a part of crafting the Senate budget, to do just that. And secondly, to say that it's important that as we go through this budget setting process, that we not go out and scare people as a way of strengthening one's political hand. You know, if you go into a theater, it is illegal to go out and yell fire there in the theater for the danger that it puts folks in. And so in fairness to the teachers who were gathered out yesterday on the steps, I would be frightened too if I was looking at a chaos budget that was as draconian as the one that Senator Leatherman has put together. But again, it's my hope to work with senators like this to say, no, there is a middle ground here wherein you could produce a responsible budget that takes care of education and healthcare needs and a whole host of other things, while at the same time doing things that will stabilize, strengthen our financial position with regard to paying down debt. If you look at the numbers, let me go back to that point on where we are right now. The debate about the $700 million, which represents about 10% of the total stimulus package, about 25% of the checks that will be cut. If you look at those numbers, it's $350 this year, $350 next year. The budget that Senator Leatherman has put together excludes, and that's federal money, excludes $578 million of other federal money. And that is what creates the so-called chaos budget. It is disingenuous to say that we got to accept this $350 million here from the federal government, but to exclude from your budget 578 other say that in English, $578 million of other federal monies. The House, to their credit, included those monies in building their budget. And when I met yesterday with Senator Leatherman, his point was, well, we're not sure if we're going to include that money. And I smiled and then said, come on. We all know how the story ends. You will include that money because you're insisting and encouraging us to include the $350 that's now being debated with regard to debt. The bottom line is that we're $300 million. In other words, the House and Senate budget writers will have $300 million more than we had when we built our executive branch budget. And if you look at the House budget versus our budget, we were able to come within $3 on a per student basis on the base student cost. Our budget did not contemplate thousands of teachers being laid off. I think that at the end of the day, what this debate comes down to is a debate about reform versus not. And what some folks have said is, let's not include any reform savings because we don't want to do that. It's almost like the GM example. GM, we were told, look, if you just give us these billions of dollars, we'll make reforms, and then in time, votes up.
They have their vote up.
Okay.
No call vote going on.
What they said was, with the GM, could you close that door, please? Thanks, appreciate it. What they said with the GM example was, if you just give us these billions of dollars, we'll make reforms, and then we'll be competitive. They took the money, the reforms were not be made. At a South Carolina level, what we've got to look at in terms of creating long-term employment opportunities for the people of our state is that we make some reforms that in many cases are long overdue. And I think that if there's any silver lining to the gray clouds that we're all dealing with economically, is that it could force the very changes that many people have been debating and having conversation about for quite some years. I see, Tom, you're still here.
Sure.
You want to say something for just a minute? And
I did.
And then let you run up for your vote as others come back.
Yeah, I'm a freshman senator, and I've been down in this governor's office for about 5 years, and so I'm getting a unique perspective on things. One of the things that I'm learning about is the budgeting process firsthand up in the legislature. And I'm horrified that we have finance committee members coming back to the floor of the Senate, briefing us on, what monies we have, what programs we have to cut, and they knowingly, intentionally, and for what I think is a bad political purpose, leave out $578 million they know they have, and that the House used. And the House used it. $200 million was taken to put to the general fund, $35 million was put into the local government fund, $193 million was transferred to other healthcare agencies, and $107 million was left in Medicaid. $578 million that they know they're going to spend, they didn't include it in that budget for one reason and one reason only. They wanted to create a scenario where they could create a spectacle, where they could go ahead and have teachers that are all riled up and worried about losing their jobs when that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Our job as a legislature in this, I see, is two things. We have got to empower this governor to put him in a position to apply for that $700 million. And how do we do that? We have to make sure that education is funded at the 05-06 levels. That is a necessary condition precedent in the federal act in order to empower this governor to apply for that $700 million. So that's job one. And when that budget hits that floor in a couple of weeks, if we haven't met that obligation, there are senators that will offer up amendment after amendment to cut from other programs and put into education so that 05-06 benchmark can be set, so this governor is empowered to apply for that $700 million. The second job we have is to draft a responsible budget using the monies we know we have. Using the monies we know we have. Not to come up with a budget that makes a political point, not to come up with a budget that brings people out of the State House laws about losing their jobs, but a responsible budget. And when you draft a budget that intentionally leaves out $578 million that they know they have, we have not met our obligations as budget writers.